James Keller drove his pickup truck through Nashville's late-night traffic, listening to a cybersecurity podcast. The host's voice was a backdrop to his own thoughts as he discussed new vulnerabilities in cloud computing. A project at work developing a new app for a healthcare startup was being held up by a client's nitpicking. Things were turbulent at home, too. Laura, his wife, had become distant, almost a stranger, in recent months. Their marriage of 16 years had weathered its share of upheavals. The birth of their children, a move from Clarksville to Nashville, financial difficulties as James began his career. But something was different now. He noticed it in small ways. Laura was staying late more often at meetings with colleagues at the school where she worked as a psychologist. Her phone was now always face down, and when she typed messages, she did so with a kind of nervous haste. James tried not to pay attention to it. Maybe it's just stress at work, he told himself, but the anxiety sat like a splinter somewhere under his ribs. That evening, he pulled into the driveway of their two-story house in the Green Hills neighborhood. The light was on in the living room, and James walked in to find Laura sitting on the couch with her laptop. She quickly slammed the lid shut as soon as he walked in. "Work?" he asked, trying to keep his voice neutral. "Yeah, a report for school," Laura replied without looking at him. Her fingers nervously fiddled with the hem of her sweater. James nodded, but something in her tone too sharp, too fast made him wary. He went into the kitchen to get some water and heard Laura get up and head upstairs, muttering something about Liam. Their 10-year-old son always demanded a bedtime story, and Laura often used that as an excuse to leave the room. Her phone was on the kitchen table. James rarely looked at it, but today the screen lit up with a notification. He glanced at it and froze. The message read, "You were incredible today. Tomorrow at 7. Sender, Dan, school." His heart pounded as if he'd just run a mile. Dan was a school counselor, a colleague of Laura's. James had seen him a few times at parent-teacher conferences, tall, with a neat beard and an overly friendly smile. Laura often mentioned him in conversations about projects and grants for the school. James tried to convince himself that this was just a work email. Maybe they were discussing a seminar. But "you were incredible" didn't sound businesslike at all. He didn't open the message, it seemed too much, and he didn't know the password. Instead, he took a screenshot of the notification on his phone, taking a picture of the screen. His fingers shook slightly as he sent the picture to his cloud. Just in case, he thought, although he already knew that this was not going to be an easy case. At dinner, Laura was her usual self, asking Emma about her biology project, teasing Liam about spilling his juice again. But James couldn't shake the feeling that he was watching her through a glass of fog. Every gesture, every word, seemed suspicious now. After dinner, when Laura had gone to put Liam to bed and Emma was busy with her homework, James opened his laptop and began to look through their shared calendar. Nothing out of the ordinary: a parent-teacher conference, Liam's soccer practice, her meeting with colleagues tomorrow night. But he looked at those entries differently now. He barely slept that night. He lay staring at the ceiling, replaying moments that had seemed trivial before. Laura's new perfume, which she had bought just because. Her frequent girls' nights with her friends, which she talked about in too many generalities. Her evasive answers when he asked how her day had been. By 3 in the morning, James knew he couldn't just wait. He had to know the truth, but he had to act smartly, not on impulse. That morning, while Laura was making the kids breakfast, he booked an appointment with a family therapist through an online platform. "I need to figure out what I'm feeling," he thought, although he already knew the main feeling was a mix of fear and anger. Then he logged into their banking app, just to check. He wasn't expecting anything suspicious, but he still wanted to be prepared. Laura walked down to the kitchen holding the phone. "I'm going to Memphis tomorrow," she said, pouring coffee. "School counseling conference. I'll be back Sunday." "Memphis?" James asked, trying not to show the tension. "Who are you going with?" "With colleagues," she replied, looking into her cup. "You know, a typical work trip." He nodded, but his insides sank. Memphis was 4 hours away. a convenient location for a conference or whatever. James decided he would test her words. He wasn't sure how, but he was sure that if Laura was lying, he would find out. By midday, sitting in his office, coding, he was already making a plan in his head. Check the calendar. Look at the chart statements. Maybe even talk to one of her coworkers. But the main thing was not to let his emotions get the better of him. He remembered his father telling him when he left the family, never make decisions in the heat of the moment. James hated his father for leaving, but now that advice seemed like the only anchor. That evening, he helped Emma with her algebra homework, trying to look calm. Liam, as usual, was running around the house with a football until Laura chased him into the bathroom. James looked at them, his family, and felt something inside him crack, like a mirror with a crack in it. After Laura went to bed, he opened his laptop again. In their shared cloud, he found old photos from their vacation in Gatlinburg. He and Laura, laughing, holding their children. Things had been simpler then. Or had they seemed that way? He closed the folder and began searching for information on how to check if someone is lying about a trip. Google returned dozens of tips, from ask to see the tickets to hire a private detective. The latter seemed crazy, but the thought of the tickets caught his attention. Tomorrow he would ask Laura about the details of her conference. Friday morning began with the usual bustle. Emma packing her backpack, grumbling about missing the bus, Liam smearing his porridge around his plate, and Laura, already dressed for work, checking something on her phone. James watched her from the coffee machine. Her movements were a little more jerky than usual, and her smile seemed forced when she wished the children a good day. He didn't ask about the conference over breakfast. He didn't want the children to suspect anything. But as Laura grabbed her bag and headed for the door, he called out to her. "Laura, where are you staying in Memphis? Can you tell me the name of the hotel in case something urgent happens?" She paused for a second, adjusting the strap of her bag. "Oh, I don't know for sure yet. The organizers are deciding everything. I'll write to you later," she answered and quickly left. James watched her go through the window. The lie was almost palpable. If this was a conference, why didn't she know where she was staying? He returned to the table, where Liam was still picking at his porridge. "Dad, will you pick me up from football today?" asked his son, looking at him with his big brown eyes. "Of course, champion," James smiled, although his thoughts were far away. After the kids left, he sat down at his laptop. The first thing he did was open their joint banking app. James had always been financially disciplined. He and Laura had kept a budget, saved for the kids' college, and paid off the mortgage. But now he wasn't looking for a budget, he was looking for a trail. Scrolling through the last few months of statements, he noticed a few odd transactions. A charge at the Hutton Hotel in downtown Nashville 2 months ago, $180 a night. He and Laura hadn't been there. A couple more dinners at restaurants she hadn't mentioned, the Southern Steak and Folk. The amounts weren't huge, but the dates lined up with her late nights. He uploaded the notes to a secure folder in the cloud, calling it Documents. His heart was pounding, but he forced himself to proceed methodically. Then he opened the family Google Calendar. Laura had synced her work appointments there so James could plan with the kids. Among the entries, he found one for today, meeting with Dee, 7 p.m., bar on 2nd Avenue. There was no conference in Memphis. James leaned back in his chair, feeling the blood pounding in his temples. He could call her, demand an explanation, but that would be a mistake. Laura could deny everything, and he wanted facts. He decided to go to the bar that evening and see for himself. The day at work dragged on painfully. James sat in the office, staring at the code, but his thoughts were confused. His colleague Steve, noticing his absent-mindedness, suggested going to lunch. "You okay, bro? You look like you've seen a ghost," Steve said as they sat in the cafe across from the office. "Just family stuff," James answered evasively. He wasn't ready to share. Not yet. When he returned home, he called his brother Robert. "Rob, can you sit with Emma and Liam for a couple of hours tonight? I need to take care of something." Robert, as straightforward as ever, chuckled. What, Laura's bothering you again? No problem, I'll be there at 7. But you'll tell me later what this business is. James didn't argue. Robert was his older brother, always willing to help, but with a habit of getting into his soul. By 7 p.m., Robert was in the house, having a mock fight with Liam on the sofa cushions. Emma was listening to her headphones, engrossed in TikTok. James had put on a dark jacket and grabbed his keys. I won't be back too late, he said to Robert. Be careful, he replied, squinting. He clearly sensed that something was wrong. The bar on 2nd Avenue was one of those trendy Nashville spots that served craft beer and had live music. James parked a block away, feeling out of place, like a character in a pulp detective story. He even wore a baseball cap to blend in. As he approached the place, he stopped at a large window covered by a curtain. Through the crack, he saw Laura. She was sitting at a table in the corner across from Dan. They were laughing, and Dan touched her arm, too long, too intimately. Laura didn't pull away. James felt his insides tighten. He pulled out his phone and snapped a few pictures through the glass, trying to get them clear. He wanted to rush in, grab her hand, and demand an explanation. But he forced himself to leave. Anger was seething, but he knew that his emotions were his enemy right now. At home, Robert had already put Liam to bed and was watching football. Emma was still in her room. Well, have you solved your case? Robert asked, without looking up from the screen. Not really, James muttered. Thanks for sitting. Robert nodded, but his gaze was intent. James realized that he would soon have to tell his brother the truth. But not today. Late that night, when the house was quiet, he called Matt, his friend from basketball. Matt had been through a divorce for 3 years and often joked that it was like surviving the apocalypse. Matt, I need some advice, James began, trying to speak quietly. I think Laura is cheating on me. There was a pause on the other end. Damn, bro, that's shit, Matt finally said. Do you have proof? Photos, screenshots, map extracts, James listed. Okay, you're already one step ahead. Look, first thing, get a lawyer. Right now. In Tennessee, property division is chess, and you need a grandmaster. If she beats you to it, it's going to be worse. Matt gave him the contact details of Catherine Wilson, a lawyer who helped him keep his house after his divorce. And James, Matt added, don't talk to her until you're ready. She might turn it against you. James wrote down Catherine's number and promised to keep Matt updated. The conversation eased the tension, but he still couldn't sleep. He opened his laptop and started searching for information about divorce in Tennessee. Google returned a ton of articles about fair distribution of property, how infidelity affected child support, custody rights. His head was spinning, but he forced himself to read. By morning, he had a plan. First, meet with Catherine Wilson. Second, gather more evidence. Third, talk to a therapist. The first session was scheduled for Monday. He also decided to check to see if Laura was really in Memphis. If she was lying, he would find a way to prove it. On Saturday morning, Laura called to say she was in Memphis and everything was going great. Her voice was too cheerful, as if she was trying to convince him. James responded neutrally, but immediately opened their credit card app after the call. There had been no transactions from Memphis, but there was a new one, a coffee shop in downtown Nashville last night after a bar. He felt his anger rising again, but he forced himself to breathe evenly. Evidence, he thought. Gather it all, then act. By evening, Laura texted that she was tired from the conference and would go to bed early. James didn't respond. Instead, he started searching the internet for ways to check someone's location. Most of the methods required access to her phone, which he didn't have. But he remembered that Laura sometimes forgot to turn off location services in the family app for her kids. He opened the app and saw that her phone had been in Nashville the night before. That was the last straw. James realized he couldn't pretend everything was okay anymore. He had to prepare for the worst. James spent Saturday trying to keep his temper in check. He drove Liam to soccer practice, helped Emma with a biology project, but his thoughts kept returning to Laura. Her call from Memphis and the lack of transactions from out of town only reinforced his suspicions. By evening, he decided he couldn't wait any longer. When Laura returned, he would confront her. But everything had to be under control, no yelling, no impulses. He wanted the truth, not a scene. Laura returned on Sunday afternoon. James heard her car pull into the garage and felt his pulse quicken. She walked into the house, dropping her bag by the door, looking tired, but not so tired that she believed she had been to a 3-day conference. "Hi," she said, smiling. "Phew, these trips are exhausting. How are you doing without me?" "It's fine," James replied, trying to keep his voice even. "The kids did their homework. Liam scored a goal yesterday." Laura nodded, but her gaze slid past him as if she were avoiding eye contact. She started to talk about interesting reports and new counseling techniques, but James was barely listening. He was waiting for the kids to go upstairs. Emma, as usual, had retired to her room with her headphones, and Liam had run off to play Xbox. "Laura, we need to talk," James said when they were alone in the living room. She froze, holding a cup of tea in her hands. "About what?" she asked, a slight tremor appearing in her voice. James took out his phone, opened a screenshot of Dan's message, and showed it to her. "You were incredible today. Tomorrow at 7?" the screen read. Laura turned pale, but immediately tried to laugh it off. "It's just a colleague, James. Are you spying on me?" She laughed, but it sounded nervous. "Then explain it," he said, opening the photographs from the bar on 2nd Avenue. In the pictures, she and Dan were sitting close, his hand touching hers, and her smile was one James hadn't seen in years. Laura fell silent. Her fingers clenched around her cup until her knuckles turned white. She set the tea down and looked down. "It's not what you think," she began, but her voice trembled. "Then what is it, Laura?" James tried to speak calmly, but inside he was seething. "You're lying about Memphis. I checked the map, the calendar, and the geolocation. You were in Nashville with him." She looked up, and there were tears in her eyes. "Okay," she breathed. "Yeah, I had something with Dan. But it doesn't mean anything, James. It was a mistake. I was just confused." The words hit like a hammer. He waited for the truth, but it still hurt to hear it. The anger he had been holding in for 2 days was bursting out, but he forced himself to breathe evenly. "Confused?" he asked. "You lied to me for months. Met him in hotels, in bars. What's that called, Laura?" She burst into tears, covering her face with her hands. "Please, James, it wasn't serious. I didn't mean to hurt you. Let's talk. We can fix this." "Fix it." His voice became harsher. "You destroyed our trust. I can't forgive it. I want a divorce." Laura froze, as if she couldn't believe it. Then she spoke again, her voice pleading. "Think about the kids, James. Emma, Liam, we can go to a therapist, start over. Don't do this." "You should have been thinking about the children when you lied to me," he snapped. "I can't live with this." He turned and walked upstairs, feeling his anger give way to a strange relief. The truth was out there, and despite the pain, it was clear. In the bedroom, he threw his clothes, laptop, and toiletries into a duffel bag. Laura followed, still crying. "Where are you going?" she asked, grabbing his hand. "To Robert," he replied, freeing himself. "I need time. Don't call until I get in touch with myself." He left the house without looking back. In the car, on the way to his brother, he felt tears burning his eyes, but he held back. He would cry later. Now he needed to act. Robert lived in East Nashville, in a small house next to his auto repair shop. When James arrived, his brother was watching basketball and drinking beer. "What the hell, James?" Robert asked, seeing him with the bag. "Did you and Laura have a fight?" James sat down on the couch, opened the beer his brother handed him, and told him everything. About the message, the bar, the photos, the lie about Memphis, about Laura's confession. Robert listened, shaking his head. "Damn, bro, that's shit," he said when James finished. "She really set you up. What's next?" "Divorce," James replied. "I already spoke to Matt. He gave me the contact for a lawyer, Catherine Wilson. I'll call tomorrow. Robert nodded, his face turning serious. Good. Protect your money and your children. She has already made her choice. Stay with me as long as you need. The guest room is yours. James thanked him, feeling some of the weight lifted by his brother's support. They finished their beers, discussing the details. Robert was as forthright as ever. Don't let her manipulate you. She might start playing on your guilt, especially with the kids. Be prepared. Late that night, lying in the guest room, James opened his laptop. He wrote an email to Catherine Wilson, briefly describing the situation and asking to meet. Then he began looking for a financial advisor. Divorce meant dividing up assets, and their home, 401k, and company stock all needed to be protected. He didn't know how far Laura would go, but he was going to be prepared. On Monday morning, he drove the kids to school, trying to look normal. Emma was, as usual, engrossed in her phone, but Liam asked, "Dad, did you spend the night at Uncle Rob's?" "Yes, son," James replied, smiling. "Just helping him with some chores." Liam nodded, but his eyes were wary. James realized that the children would soon start asking questions. He had to be careful not to drag them into conflict. In the office, he could barely concentrate. The code he wrote seemed like a meaningless jumble of lines. At lunch, he called Matt to thank him for his advice. "You're doing the right thing by moving fast," Matt said. "My mistake was waiting too long. Get all the paperwork together, statements, mortgage, taxes, and keep me posted if you need a beer and a chat." James promised. Talking to Matt reminded him he wasn't alone. He had friends, a brother, and a plan. By evening, Laura sent a text. "James, we need to talk about the kids. Can we meet tomorrow? I don't want it to end like this." He read it and didn't respond. Something told him this wasn't just a conversation about the kids. Laura might be plotting a countermove, and he wasn't about to give her the upper hand. Before bed, he had a Zoom session with a therapist. A woman in her 50s, Dr. Clark, listened to his story and asked, "How are you feeling right now, James?" He thought about it. Anger and emptiness, as if everything we built turned out to be a fake. She nodded, suggesting that he start small, keep a journal of his emotions and focus on what he could control. James agreed, although the idea of a journal seemed strange, but he was willing to try anything to avoid drowning in the chaos. James woke up in Robert's spare room feeling like he'd been run over by a truck. It had been a restless night, tossing and turning, replaying Laura's confession and her tears in his head. Her words, "It was a mistake, nothing serious," had sounded like mockery, but underneath the anger was the pain, and that was what scared him most. He didn't want to drown in emotion. Today was the day for action. In the morning, he drove the children to school, trying to appear cheerful. Emma was glued to her phone as usual, but Liam chatted about football, oblivious to his father's tension. James was grateful for their ignorance, but knew he would soon have to explain. After school, he drove to the office, where he had an appointment with Catherine Wilson, a lawyer recommended by Matt. Catherine was a woman in her mid-30s, with a straight posture and a calm gaze that inspired confidence. Her office in downtown Nashville was small but neat, shelves of law books, diplomas on the wall, the smell of freshly brewed coffee. She listened to James's story, making notes on a legal pad. "So," she began, putting down her pen, "you want a divorce, citing adultery. In Tennessee, that can affect property division and alimony, but not custody. Let's get the basics out of the way." Catherine explained that Tennessee follows the principle of equal distribution rather than community property like some other states. This meant that the court would not divide the property exactly half and half, but based on each spouse's contribution, their income, and other factors. Laura may qualify for child support if her income is lower than yours, Catherine added. You have children, so custody will be a key issue. What do you want in that regard? Joint custody, James answered without hesitation. Emma and Liam need to spend equal time with both of us. I don't want them to feel like they're losing a parent. Catherine nodded, writing it down. Okay? That's reasonable, but Laura might ask for primary custody, especially if she tries to make you look bad. We need to be prepared. She advised gathering all financial documents, the mortgage on the house, 401k and ERA statements, tax returns for the last 3 years, stock information from the company where James worked. And keep all evidence of the betrayal, she added. Screenshots, photographs, extracts. If it goes to court, it could tip the scales in your favor in terms of alimony or division of property. James showed her a screenshot of the text from Dan, the photos from the bar, and then statements with the suspicious transactions. Catherine looked at them, squinting slightly. That's a good start. But be careful. Don't record her conversations without consent, and don't try to hack her phone. In Tennessee, that could be used against you. He nodded, feeling both prepared and overwhelmed. Catherine promised to have a divorce petition ready within a week and suggested they start with mediation to try to reach an agreement with Laura without going to court. But if she's in a belligerent mood, Catherine warned, be prepared for a long fight. After the meeting, James felt like he'd taken the first step into an abyss. It all became real. The divorce, the trial, the division of property. He returned to the office, but the code he'd been working on felt meaningless. At lunch, he wrote to Matt, thanking him for the recommendation of Catherine. Hang in there, bro, Matt replied. If anything happens, invite me for a beer. Divorce is like a marathon. The main thing is not to break down in the first miles. That evening, Laura called, as she had promised in her text. James agreed to meet at a cafe near Robert's house. He chose a neutral location so that the conversation would not escalate into an argument. The Frothy Monkey was crowded, with the smell of fresh buns and the hum of conversation. Laura was already sitting at a table by the window, holding a latte. She looked tired, with dark circles under her eyes, but she tried to act confident. Thank you for coming, she began, fiddling with her napkin. I want to talk about the kids. We don't have to ruin everything, James. We can work this out without going to court, for Emma and Liam's sake. James looked at her, trying to figure out if she was being sincere. Her voice was soft, but he noticed that she avoided mentioning Dan or her betrayal. This made him wary. I want the kids to be happy too, he said, but I can't pretend nothing happened. We're going through the courts. It's the only way to make it fair. Laura frowned, her fingers tightening on the napkin. A trial? Are you serious? It will ruin us, James. And what will it do to the children? You should have thought of this before, he replied, trying not to raise his voice. I'm not going to negotiate behind your back. My lawyer is already working on the petition. Her eyes widened. A lawyer? You already hired a lawyer? She leaned back in her chair as if he'd slapped her. You didn't even give me a chance to explain. I gave you a chance, Laura. On Sunday, you admitted you lied. That's enough. She fell silent, looking out the window. James noticed her hand shaking, but he felt no pity. He was ready for manipulation, as Robert had warned. Okay, she said finally. If you want war, you'll have it. But don't complain when the kids blame you. She stood up and walked away, leaving the latte untouched. James watched her go, feeling anger and weariness mingle inside him. He knew she would try to guilt-trip him, but he was determined not to give in. Returning to Robert, he told his brother about the meeting. Robert, as always, was straightforward. She's trying to scam you, brother. Don't fall for it. Keep a lawyer ready and don't talk to her without witnesses. James nodded, but Laura's words about the children still hurt. He didn't want Emma and Liam to get hurt, but how could he protect them if Laura wasn't playing fair? That evening, he had a second session with his therapist, Dr. Clark, over Zoom. She noticed his tension and asked, "What has changed since we last met, James?" He told her about his conversation with Laura, her threat, and his fears for the children. Dr. Clark listened attentively, then said, "Your anger is a defensive reaction. It helps you move forward, but it's important not to let it overshadow everything else. What can you control right now? Documents, a lawyer, evidence," he replied. and the way I behave with the children. Good, she nodded. Focus on that. And try the journal we discussed. Even a few lines about how you're feeling will help. James promised to give it a try, though the idea still seemed strange to him. After the session, he opened his laptop and began gathering documents, as Catherine had suggested. He downloaded mortgage statements, 401k information, and company stock. It took a couple of hours, but it gave him a sense of control. Before he went to bed, he received a letter from Catherine confirming that the divorce petition would be ready by Wednesday. She also asked if he wanted to clarify whether he wanted to file for a temporary restraining order to restrict Laura from dealing with their joint finances. James considered this. It was a big step, but remembering Laura's threat of war, he decided it was better to be on the safe side. On Tuesday morning, he learned from Matt that Laura had hired her own attorney, a man named Greg Thompson, known in Nashville for his tough negotiations. Matt heard this from a mutual friend who worked at Laura's school. She's not wasting any time, Matt said over the phone. Stay alert, brother. James felt his stomach tighten. Laura was clearly preparing for a fight, and he had to be ready to respond. He wrote to Catherine, informing her of Laura's new lawyer and asking her to expedite the petition. Lying in Robert's bed, he stared at the ceiling and thought about how quickly his life had become a game of chess. Every move had to be calculated, every step weighed, but he was determined not to lose for himself and for the children. James woke up feeling like his life was now made up of lists, documents to gather, evidence to preserve, steps to take. Tuesday morning was gray, with a light rain pattering against the windows of Robert's house. He made coffee, careful not to wake his brother, and checked his email. Catherine Wilson had written that the divorce petition was almost ready, and that news of Laura's hiring of a lawyer, Greg Thompson, meant they needed to speed up the process. Thompson is playing hardball, she wrote. We need to be one step ahead. James responded, confirming that he wanted to file for a temporary restraining order to protect their joint finances. He drove the kids to school, trying to look normal. Emma was silent, staring at her phone, but Liam was chatting about football as usual. Dad, will you come to my game on Saturday? He asked, throwing his backpack over his shoulder. Of course, champion, James smiled, although inside he was cringing at the thought that Laura could use the children in her manipulations. At the office, he was distracted. The code he was writing for a new app wasn't working, and his colleague Steve noticed his state. You're like a zombie, James, he said during a break. Still family business. Yeah, something like that, James answered evasively. He didn't want to go into details, but the loneliness was starting to weigh on him. After lunch, he made an appointment with a financial advisor he'd found through Matt's referral. The advisor, Mark Davis, worked for a small firm in downtown Nashville. His office was sterile and modern, glass walls, minimalist desks, a view of skyscrapers. Mark, a man in his 50s with neat gray hair, listened to James and asked him to bring all his financial documents. Let's take stock of what we're working with, he said, opening his laptop. The house, the mortgage, the retirement accounts, the stocks, all of that needs to be taken into account. James handed over the printouts he'd collected the day before. A mortgage on a $450,000 house with a balance of $300,000, his 401k with a balance of $200,000, Laura's era for $80,000, his company stock for $50,000. Mark looked over the numbers, making notes. You're in pretty good shape, considering Nashville's middle class, he said. But divorce in Tennessee can be complicated. Laura might be entitled to half the house and part of your 401k if they're considered marital property. Company stock is more complicated, depending on when it was purchased. What about alimony? James asked, remembering Catherine's words. If her income is lower, she can ask for temporary or long-term alimony. But the betrayal you mentioned may reduce her chances. The main thing is to freeze the joint accounts so that she cannot withdraw the money. I will prepare a letter to the bank. James nodded, feeling the reality of divorce sink in. Mark also advised them to hire an appraiser for the house to accurately determine its market value and warned that the court might require them to divide even small assets, like their car or their children's college savings. And one more thing, Mark added, don't sign anything from Laura without a lawyer. She might offer a settlement that will be in her favor. Leaving the office, James felt a little more confident. He had a plan, a team, Catherine and Mark, and a goal to protect himself and the kids, but he was emotionally drained. That evening, he decided to meet up with some friends from his basketball team. Matt suggested the local, a noisy place with wooden tables and the smell of fried chicken wings. 4 of them gathered for a beer: Matt, James, their friend Travis, and the newcomer to the team, Paul. Matt, as usual, was joking, but noticing James's gloomy face, he pulled him aside. "Well, tell me," he said, taking a sip of beer. "What's going on with Laura?" James sighed and gave a brief account. The affair, the lawyer, the financial advisor. Matt listened, nodding. "You're on the right track," he said. "I waited too long, and my ex took half my savings. Look, Travis went through this too. Talk to him." Travis, a strong guy in his mid-40s, joined the conversation. He had gone through a divorce 2 years ago and shared his experience. "The main thing is don't let her play on her emotions," he said. "My ex tried to make me look like a bad father to get custody. Record all your conversations with Laura if it's legal. In Tennessee, it's legal if one party agrees, which is you." "Write it down?" James asked. "Yeah, in case she starts lying or threatening. Saved my ass in court that way," Travis chuckled. "And don't tell the kids too much. They already feel everything." Paul, who was younger and not yet married, listened silently, but at the end he added, "Take time off if you need to. You're like at war now, brother." Talking to his friends made James feel like he wasn't alone. He wasn't used to sharing personal things, but their support, albeit rough, helped. He returned home to Robert late, with a slight sense of relief. But Laura wouldn't let him rest. She called all day, leaving messages. "James, please let's talk. You're ruining our family. The kids miss you." He didn't answer, but each message was nerve-wracking. By evening, she sent another. "I don't want war. Let's meet without lawyers." James read it 3 times. Part of him wanted to believe she was sincere, but Travis's words about manipulation echoed in his head. He decided to discuss it with Catherine before agreeing. At his next session with his therapist, Dr. Clark, he talked about Laura's calls and his doubts. "I want to protect the kids, but what if I was too hasty?" he admitted. "Maybe I should have tried couples therapy." Dr. Clark looked at him through the screen, her voice calm. "These are normal doubts, James. You're feeling betrayed, and your mind is looking for ways to regain control. But ask yourself, can you trust Laura after what she did?" He thought about it. Trust was the foundation of their marriage, and Laura had destroyed it. No, he couldn't go back. "I can't," he finally said, "but it's hard for me to think about the children growing up in divorce." "Then focus on being a good father to them," she suggested. "It's within your power." After the session, James began keeping a journal, as Dr. Clark had suggested. He wrote a few lines. "I'm angry at Laura, but I'm more afraid for the kids. I want to be strong, but sometimes I feel like I'm drowning." It was strange, but it helped him get his emotions out. That evening, he received a call from Catherine. She informed him that the petition had been filed and the court had scheduled a preliminary hearing in 3 weeks. "Laura has already been served," Catherine added. "Her lawyer, Thompson, is known for dragging out cases to wear down his opponent. Be prepared for pressure." James thanked her and hung up. He could feel the fight getting real. Laura clearly wasn't going to give in, and he had to be ready for whatever she did. Before going to bed, he checked his phone and saw a new text from Emma. "Dad, where are you? Why aren't you home?" His heart sank. She rarely texted, preferring to call, and this text was like a wake-up call. He wrote back, "I'm at Uncle Rob's, honey. See you soon. Love you." But he knew it would be soon, I'll have to explain more to her. Lying in the dark, James thought about how quickly his life had become a minefield. Every step required caution, every conversation a calculation. But he was determined to get through this, for himself and the children. James woke to the sound of rain pounding the roof of Robert's house. It was a gloomy Wednesday morning, and his mood matched the weather. The text from Emma he'd received the night before was on his mind. Her question, "Dad, why aren't you home?" had been like a knife, a reminder that the children were beginning to sense the rift in their family. He knew he had to talk to her, but how could he explain to a 14-year-old that their family was falling apart without dragging her into the conflict? Over coffee, he texted Emma, "I'll be stopping by after school today. Let's chat. Love you." The reply came quickly, "Okay, Dad." It was short, but it gave him hope that she hadn't closed him off just yet. Liam hadn't seemed to be asking questions yet, but James knew his 10-year-old son would soon be suspicious too. At the office, he tried to concentrate on the code, but his mind kept wandering to Laura and her lawyer. Catherine had warned him that Greg Thompson was a procrastinator, and that was scary. James didn't want the divorce to drag on for years, draining his money and energy. He wrote to Catherine to check on the petition and got a reply. "Everything under control. Petition filed, awaiting Thompson's response. Keep your evidence handy." After dinner, he decided to call Dr. Clark, his therapist, and asked for an emergency session. She agreed to an evening session. James felt he needed someone to help him sort out his emotions, especially before talking to Emma. At 3 o'clock, he picked Emma up from school. She came out of the building with her backpack slung over one shoulder, looking wary. In the car, she was silent, looking out the window. James decided to start softly. "How are you, sunshine?" he asked, trying to sound warm. "It's fine," she answered, without taking her eyes off the window. "And you?" "That's fine too," he lied. "It's just, Mom and I have some adult problems right now, so I'm going to stay with Uncle Rob for a while." Emma turned to face him, her eyes serious. "Are you getting divorced?" she asked bluntly. James froze. He hadn't expected her to get to the point so quickly. He didn't want to lie, but the truth might hurt her. "We're still working it out," he said carefully. "But no matter what happens, I'll always be your dad, and Liam's too. You know that, right?" She nodded, but her gaze became distant. "Just don't lie to me, Dad. I'm not a little girl." "I promise," he said, feeling his throat tighten. He took her home to Laura and left with a heavy heart. Emma was right, she was not a little girl, and he could not hide the truth from her for long. But he decided that, for now, he would say only the most necessary things. The evening before his session with Dr. Clark, he received a call from Catherine. Laura and her lawyer received the petition, she said. "We listed adultery as the reason for the divorce, which gives us a strong position on alimony and property. I also filed a motion for a temporary restraining order on the joint accounts." "What about guardianship?" James asked. "You asked for joint custody, and I reflected that. But Laura, judging from Thompson's preliminary response, wants primary custody and child support. This is a standard ploy to put pressure on you. Don't worry, we'll handle it." James thanked him, but the news of primary custody hit like a hammer. Laura wanted to take the kids. It was unthinkable. He wasn't going to give up Emma and Liam without a fight. The session with Dr. Clark helped ease the tension a little. He told me about his conversation with Emma and the news from Catherine. "I'm afraid that Laura will use the children against me," he admitted, "and Emma will start blaming me." "Your fears are understandable," Dr. Clark replied. "But you already do a lot to protect them, telling the truth in moderation, staying in touch. The children feel cared for. As for Laura, you can't control her actions, but you can control yours. How do you deal with anger?" "I write in my diary, as you advised," he said. "Sometimes it helps, but I still want to scream." "That's okay," she nodded. "Try physical activity. Running, the gym, even walking. It helps channel your emotions." James promised to try. After the session, he walked around Robert's neighborhood, breathing in the humid Nashville air. The rain had stopped, and the streets smelled of wet asphalt. The walk eased some of the tension, but thoughts of Laura and her demand for primary custody lingered. The next day, he began gathering evidence for the trial, as Catherine had suggested. He printed out the map statements, the screenshots of the messages, the photos from the bar. Then he checked their shared Google Calendar again, hoping to find something new. There was an entry, lunch with D, last Tuesday. James remembered that Laura had said she would be late for a school assembly. Another lie. He also noticed that Laura no longer mentioned Dan in conversations or messages. This made him wary. Was their relationship over, or was she just being more cautious? He decided to discuss this with Catherine to see how to use the evidence in court. In the evening, Robert, noticing his gloomy mood, suggested watching basketball. "You're like a zombie brother," he said, opening a beer. "What did Laura do now?" James explained the primary custody request. Robert frowned. "She plays dirty. Don't give her a chance. The kids love you, and the court will see it." "I hope so," James sighed. "But Liam called yesterday, being cranky. He wants me to come home." "He's little. It's hard for him," Robert said. "Just be there, and don't let Laura manipulate them." The conversation with his brother, as always, gave him strength. James decided to increase his time with the children, picking them up from school, taking them to training, having dinner together. He didn't want them to feel his absence. On Friday, he picked Liam up from football and took him for pizza. Liam was in high spirits, telling stories of how he had almost scored a goal. But at the end of the meal, he suddenly asked, "Dad, are you coming home? Mom says you're just busy." James felt his throat tighten. Laura was clearly trying to soften the situation, but her words only served to confuse Liam. "I'll always be with you, son," he said, looking him in the eyes. "I'm just staying with Uncle Rob right now, but we'll see each other often, I promise." Liam nodded, but looked confused. James knew he needed to talk to Laura about how they were explaining the situation to the kids. He didn't want her to lie to them, but he wasn't ready for the full disclosure either. On Saturday, he went to Liam's game as promised. Laura was there too, standing off to the side with the other parents. She glanced at him, but didn't come over. James felt her eyes on him, but focused on his son. Liam played with enthusiasm, and when he scored, James screamed with joy, forgetting everything else for a moment. After the game, he drove the children home and decided to talk to Laura. She opened the door, looking tired. "We need to agree on what we tell the kids," he said. "Liam's asking if I'm coming back. You can't just say I'm busy." "What am I supposed to say?" she snapped. "That you left us because of some misunderstanding." "Misunderstandings?" James clenched his fists, but held back. "Don't drag the kids into this, Laura. Let's tell them we have adult problems, but we both love them." She nodded, but her gaze was cold. "Okay, but don't think that I'll give in court." James left, feeling his anger rising again. Talking to Laura had only confirmed that she wouldn't back down. That evening, he received a letter from Catherine. "Thompson has filed a counterclaim. Laura accuses you of emotional neglect, claiming you were an estranged spouse. This is a tactic to weaken your position on treason. We need to prepare a refutation." James stared at the screen, feeling the ground shift beneath his feet. Emotional neglect. Laura was rewriting their marriage to make him feel guilty. He texted Catherine, asking for an urgent meeting. As he lay in bed, he thought about how far this war had come. The lines had been drawn, and he knew he had to stand firm for himself, Emma, and Liam. James woke up feeling like he was being crushed under a slab of concrete. Laura's counterclaim for emotional neglect echoed in his mind like an accusation he couldn't accept. He'd always tried to be a good husband and father, working long hours to pay the mortgage, taking Liam to football games, helping Emma with her homework. And now Laura was rewriting their story to make him feel guilty. Anger mingled with a sense of injustice, but he forced himself to get up, make coffee, and focus on the next step. He started Thursday morning by emailing Catherine Wilson, asking for an urgent meeting to discuss Laura's lawsuit. Catherine responded quickly, "This is a standard tactic. Thompson is trying to weaken our position on adultery. Come to the office at 2 p.m. James felt a little relieved Catherine seemed to know what to do. But the thought of Laura lying in court was nagging. He drove the kids to school, trying to look cheerful. Liam was chatting about his team as usual, but Emma was quieter than usual. James noticed that she was avoiding his gaze, and it stung. She had been distant since their conversation last week, and he was worried that Laura was turning her against him. He decided to take the kids out for a day out, maybe a trip to the park, or a movie to remind them that he was there. At the office, Catherine greeted him with her usual calm. She leafed through the documents Laura's lawyer had sent and explained the situation. "Laura claims you were emotionally unavailable, which led to the breakdown of the marriage," she said, tapping her pen on the table. "It's an attempt to neutralize the accusation of adultery. But we have evidence of her affair with Dan, and the Tennessee court takes adultery into account when dividing property and alimony. We'll defeat her claim by showing that you were an involved spouse and father." "What?" James asked, feeling his anger give way to weariness. "She just lies, and she's going to get away with it?" "Not if we do it right," Catherine said. "We need evidence of your involvement in the family. Photos, correspondence, schedules of picking up the kids from school or taking them to practice. If you have friends or family who can attest to your involvement as a father, that will help." James nodded, making a mental list. He could ask Robert, Matt, even Liam's football coach. But the idea of having to prove he was a good father seemed absurd. Catherine also said the court had ordered mediation to begin next week on the property division. Mediation was mandatory in Tennessee before a trial to try to reach an agreement without going to trial. "Be prepared for Laura and Thompson to push," she warned. "They may offer a deal that looks good but protects her interests. Don't agree to anything without me." As James left the office, tension tightened in his temples. He got into his car and spent a few minutes just breathing, watching the people passing by. He needed something to give him back a sense of control. He called Mark Davis, their financial advisor, to check on the status of their accounts. Mark confirmed that the joint accounts were frozen, but he noticed a new transaction on Laura's personal card $500 for consulting services. James frowned. It could have been anything from a lawyer's fee to an attempt to withdraw money. He asked Mark to keep an eye on her spending and alert her if anything suspicious appeared. That evening, he decided to follow Dr. Clark's advice and go for a run. He put on his running shoes and ran around Robert's neighborhood, breathing in the cool Nashville air. Running helped release some of his anger, but thoughts of mediation and the kids still swirled around in his head. When he returned, he wrote in his journal, "Laura is lying in court, and I have to prove I wasn't a bad husband. It's not fair, but I won't give in." The next day, he picked Liam up from football and noticed that his son had become more capricious. As they drove home, Liam suddenly said, "Dad, why don't you live with us? Mom says you're busy, but I don't believe it." James gripped the steering wheel. Laura continued to evade the truth, and this confused Liam. "Son, your mom and I are going through a tough time right now," he said, choosing his words carefully. "But I'll always be there for you and Emma. We'll go hiking this weekend. Would you like to?" Liam nodded, but looked upset. James realized that he needed to spend more time with the children so that they didn't feel abandoned. The mediation took place on Monday in a neutral office in downtown Nashville. The room was sterile, with a long table and the smell of coffee. James sat next to Catherine, across from Laura and Greg Thompson, a man with a cool gaze and a perfectly pressed suit. The mediator, a middle-aged woman named Susan, explained the rules. Each side would lay out its demands, then compromise. Laura spoke first, her voice calm but firm. "I want to keep the house," she said. "It's important for the kids, so they have stability. James can buy me out or take other assets." James felt the blood rush to his face. The house was worth $450,000, with a $300,000 mortgage. Buying out Laura's share would mean taking out a new loan, which he couldn't afford on his engineer's salary. Catherine squeezed his hand under the table, urging him to keep quiet. My client is also asking for half of James's 401k and child support, Thompson added, looking directly at James. Considering her role as the children's primary caregiver, that's fair. Catherine answered, her voice even but firm. My client insists on selling the house and splitting the proceeds equally. The mortgage is too large for one spouse. As for the 401k, we will provide evidence that a significant portion of the savings were made before the marriage, which excludes them from division. And given Miss Keller's adultery, her alimony claims may be contested. Laura blushed but said nothing. Thompson began to talk about emotional neglect, but Susan interrupted, suggesting they focus on the property. The negotiations quickly reached an impasse. Laura insisted on the house, arguing that the children needed a stable home, while James, through Catherine, repeated that selling was the only realistic option. If you don't come to an agreement, the court may force you to sell the house, Susan warned. Think about it before our next meeting. The mediation ended without a result. James left the office feeling drained. Catherine patted him on the shoulder. It is normal that the first mediation failed. They are testing our resolve. We are in a strong position. But Laura's words about stability for the kids stung. He knew she was using it as leverage, but the thought of the kids losing the home they grew up in still hurt. Returning to Robert, he told his brother about mediation. Robert, as always, was straightforward. She wants the house to squeeze money out of you. Don't fall for it. The kids will get used to the new place. The main thing is that you're with them. James nodded, but his doubts remained. He began looking for apartments in the area around the kids' school, knowing he needed a place where he could host Emma and Liam. He found a few in Green Hills, but the prices were steep. His salary would allow him to rent something modest, but that would mean cutting other expenses. He decided to discuss the budget with Mark the following week. That evening, he noticed that Laura was spending more than usual again. Mark sent an update, a new transaction on her card, $200 for dinner at the Catbird Seat. It was an expensive restaurant, and James doubted she had gone there alone. He forwarded the information to Catherine, asking her to check if it could be used as evidence of her financial irresponsibility. He was emotionally on edge. Dr. Clark noticed his fatigue at a regular session. You do a lot, James, she said, but you're not a machine. How do you cope with the overload? It's bad, he admitted. Running helps, but I think about the kids, about Laura, about the trial all the time. Try making time for yourself, she suggested. Even half an hour a day for something that brings you joy, and keep up the journal. It helps you realize your progress. James wrote in his diary, mediation is a waste of time. Laura wants everything, but I will not give in. I am afraid the children will suffer, but I will do everything to protect them. The entry helped take some of the pressure off. Towards the end of the week, Liam casually mentioned that Dan had come to their house. It was like a punch to the gut. James tried not to show his anger, but inside he was seething. Laura was bringing her lover to their house, where the children were. He called Catherine to discuss how to use this in court. If Dan was in the house with the children, we can file a motion for temporary, no third parties allowed, she said. But we need proof. Talk to Liam, but be careful not to traumatize him. James nodded, but the thought of talking to his son was terrifying. He didn't want to involve the children, but Laura seemed to be leaving him no choice. James sat at Robert's kitchen table, staring at his empty coffee mug. Liam's words about Dan coming to their house played in his head like a broken record. It wasn't just a betrayal. Laura had brought her lover into their family space, where Emma and Liam lived. Anger was seething, but James forced himself to breathe evenly. He couldn't let his emotions get the better of him, especially when it came to the children. Friday morning had started with a call to Catherine Wilson to discuss how to use this information in court. If Dan was in the house with the kids, we can apply for a temporary restraining order, Catherine repeated over the phone. But we need evidence. Liam said it casually, but the court will require something more substantial. Talk to him, but carefully. We don't want him to feel drawn into the conflict. I don't want to traumatize him, Jane said, clutching the phone. He's confused enough as it is. I understand, Catherine replied. Ask casually, without pressure. If he confirms, it might strengthen our guardianship position. And check to see if Laura has mentioned Dan in her texts or calendar. James hung up, feeling the weight of the task. Talking to Liam required a delicacy he wasn't sure he possessed. He decided to wait until the weekend to spend time with the kids and find the right moment. But the thought of Dan in their house was nagging. He opened his laptop and checked the family Google Calendar again. Nothing new, but the old entries for meetings with Dee now looked even more ominous. He took screenshots and sent them to Catherine, adding a note about Laura's recent spending, including a dinner at the Catbird seat. In the office, he was absent-minded. The code he was working on didn't add up, and Steve, his colleague, noticed it. James, you're like a ghost, Steve said during lunch. If you need to talk, I'm here. Thank you, James replied, but shook his head. Just family matters. He appreciated the support, but it was still hard to share details. Instead, he focused on his work, trying to distract himself. But at lunch, he got a text from Matt. Heard Laura's been hanging out with some dude from school. Be on the lookout. James gritted his teeth, so rumors were already spreading. It could hurt Laura's reputation, but he didn't want the gossip to affect the kids. That evening, he picked up Liam from football and decided to have dinner with the kids. Emma reluctantly agreed, but eventually joined in. They went to 5 Points Pizza, where Liam enthusiastically talked about his game and Emma picked at her pizza, her head buried in her phone. James decided to try to talk to Liam about Dan, but carefully. Son, you said someone came home, he began when Emma went to the bathroom. Was it Dan, Mom's coworker? Liam shrugged, munching on his pizza. Yes, he brought some papers. Mom said it was for work. Got it, James nodded, trying not to show how he shuddered. Does he come often? I don't know, a couple of times, Liam replied, switching to the conversation about football. James didn't press. The information was scant, but it confirmed that Dan had been in the house. He decided to pass it on to Catherine and ask her to check if he could request the neighbor's CCTV footage, if any. But the idea that Liam had accepted this as normal hurt. Laura wasn't just lying, she was dragging the children into her lies. Emma returned to the table and James noticed that she looked depressed. He tried to get her to talk. How are things at school? He asked. Still working on your biology project. Yeah, fine, she muttered, not looking up. Dad, when are you coming home? The question hit like lightning. James swallowed, choosing his words. Honey, I'm staying with Uncle Rob for now, but we'll see each other often. Let's go for a walk tomorrow. Would you like to Radnor Park? She nodded, but her eyes were full of distrust. James realized that Emma was becoming distant, and it could be connected to what Laura was saying at home. He decided to be more assertive in his communication with her, to prevent Laura from turning his daughter against him. The next day, he took the kids to Radnor Park, where they walked along tree-lined paths. Liam ran ahead, collecting rocks, and Emma walked alongside, occasionally answering questions. James suggested a picnic, which eased the tension a bit. He noticed Emma start to smile as Liam tried to catch a frog by the creek. These moments reminded him why he fought, for the kids. But that evening, he was dealt another blow. Catherine sent a letter. Laura has offered a settlement through Thompson. She agrees to sell the house, but wants half of your 401k and 3 years of alimony. We can fight it, but we need to discuss it. James read the letter 3 times, feeling his anger return. Half of the 401k, that was his savings, built up over years of hard work. He wrote to Catherine that he disagreed and wanted to go to court. In a session with Dr. Clark, he talked about Laura's proposal and about Dan in their home. I'm furious, he admitted. She brings this guy to the kids, and now she wants half my money. How can I not explode? Your anger is justified, Dr. Clark said, but it can blind you. Try channeling it into action, spending time with your kids, preparing for trial. What makes you feel stronger? Running, he said, and talking to my brother. It keeps me on my toes. Okay, build on that, she nodded, and keep up the journal. It helps you see your progress. James wrote in his journal, Laura has gone too far. Dan in our house is too much. I will not give her the 401k. My kids are my everything, and I will fight for them. The entry helped him get some of his emotions out, but he knew there were more battles ahead. On Monday, he met with Catherine to discuss the motion for a restraining order. She drafted a document based on what Liam had said and asked the court for a temporary order. It doesn't guarantee the court will agree, she warned, but it's a signal to Laura that we're serious about custody. If you have other evidence of a connection to Dan, that will help. James handed over more screenshots of the calendar and information about Laura's spending. Catherine nodded, writing it down. Good. We're also preparing a rebuttal to her emotional neglect claim. I've requested evidence from your brother and your friend Matt. Are they willing to confirm that you're an active father? Yes, James replied, and Liam's coach can too. By the end of the week, the court had approved the motion for a temporary restraining order. Catherine reported that Laura and Thompson had filed an objection, but that did not stop the order. James felt a brief sense of relief Laura had been hit, but he knew she would not give in. Emma, meanwhile, was becoming increasingly withdrawn. On one of their walks, she admitted that she felt her mother was lying. She says you left because you don't love us, Emma said, looking at the lake in the park. But I know that's not true. Why does she do that, Dad? James squeezed her hand, fighting the urge to tell her everything. Mom's going through a tough time, he said. But I'll never leave you and Liam. Do you believe me? She nodded, but her eyes were full of tears. James realized he had to be even closer to the kids to counteract Laura's influence. He began planning more activities together: hikes, bike rides, board game nights. In the evening, Robert, seeing his fatigue, offered him beer. You're holding up, brother, he said, but don't forget about yourself. Laura's trying to wear you down. Don't let her. James nodded, but inside he felt a storm gathering. The children were at the center of this war, and he had to protect them at all costs. The custody hearing was on the horizon, and he knew it would be decisive. James woke up in Robert's spare room with every day feeling like a new blow. The custody hearing was in 2 weeks, and the news that Dan had been to their house had added fuel to his resolve. But Emma's words about Laura turning her against him were troubling. He felt like the children were caught in the middle of a storm, and it tore at his heart. He started Monday morning with a strong cup of coffee and a call to Catherine Wilson to go over the details of the trial. The motion for a restraining order was a good step, Catherine said over the phone. The court approved it, and it shows we take the children's welfare seriously. Now we need to strengthen your position on custody. Gather evidence that you're an active father. Liam's practice schedules, Emma's school activities, any photos or messages of you with the children. I'm working on it, James replied, flipping through notes on his laptop. My brother and my friend Matt can confirm. Maybe Liam's coach can too. Excellent, Catherine nodded. And one more thing. Laura, through Thompson, continues to insist on emotional neglect. We're preparing a rebuttal, but be prepared for her to try to make you look distant in court. Don't give her a reason. James hung up, anger mixing with exhaustion. Laura wasn't just lying. She was rewriting their lives to justify her actions. He opened the folder on his laptop where he'd been filing evidence. Photos of family hikes, screenshots of texts he'd exchanged with Emma about her school projects, Liam's soccer practice schedule. It all seemed absurd, proving he'd been a good father, but he knew a court required facts. He was in a daze in the office. The code he was working on wasn't working, and Steve, his colleague, noticed his state again. James, you're like in another galaxy, Steve said during a break. If you need to take a day off, take it. You're not a robot. Thanks, James replied, "Maybe I will. It's just a lot of things." He decided to follow Dr. Clark's advice and take some time for himself. After work, he went to the gym, where he spent an hour on the treadmill and punching bag. The exercise helped release his anger, but thoughts of the past still crept up. He began to remember how he and Laura had met in college in Memphis. She had been bright, with an infectious laugh, and they had dreamed of a big family traveling a house in the suburbs. Where had it all gone wrong? Was it his fault that she felt alone? These questions plagued him, and he knew he had to find the answers to move on. That evening, he called Dr. Clark. He told her about Emma's words, about Dan in their house, about Laura's counterclaim. "I'm trying to figure out why she did it," he admitted. "Was I really too busy with work? Did I miss something she was missing?" "It's a natural reaction to blame yourself," Dr. Clark replied. "But Laura's infidelity was her choice, not your fault. You can't be held responsible for her actions. How do you feel when you think about the past?" "Guilt," he said after a pause, "and anger. I want to let it go, but I don't know how." "Start by acknowledging that you did the best you could under the circumstances," she suggested. "Write in your journal what kind of husband and father you were. That will help you see the real picture, not the one Laura paints." James promised to try. After the session, he opened his journal and wrote, "I worked to provide for the family. Took Liam to football, helped Emma with her homework, and planned holidays. I wasn't perfect, but I tried. Laura chose to lie rather than talk. It wasn't my fault." The entry helped ease the guilt a little, but it was still smoldering somewhere inside. The next day, Robert, seeing his depressed state, suggested going to the Great Smoky Mountains for the weekend. "You need some air, brother," he said, clapping James on the shoulder. "The kids are going to be with Laura, and you can't be on edge all the time." James agreed, though he doubted the trip would help. On Saturday, he and Robert loaded up the pickup with a tent and fishing rods and headed for Gatlinburg. The drive through the fall foliage-covered Tennessee hills was picturesque, and James felt the tension ease. They set up camp by a river, built a fire, and cracked open a beer. Robert was as forthright as ever. "You're stuck in the past," he said, looking into the fire. "Laura betrayed you, and that's shitty. But you can't dwell on it forever. Think about the kids. Think about yourself. What do you want after all this?" James thought about it. For the first time in weeks, he tried to imagine a future other than just fighting Laura. "I want to be a good dad," he said, "and not just survive this divorce, but build something new. Maybe start a blog or something to help other guys in the same situation." Robert nodded, throwing a branch onto the fire. "Now that sounds like a plan. Stick to it." A night in the mountains, under the stars, gave James a peace he hadn't felt in months. He looked up at the sky and realized that despite the pain, he could still find meaning. In the morning, he and Robert went fishing, laughed at how James had tangled his line, and returned to Nashville with a glimmer of hope. But reality quickly set in. On Monday, Emma sent him a screenshot of Laura's Facebook post. It was a photo of their home with the caption, "Trying to keep the kids cozy despite tough times." The comments were sympathetic. "Hang in there, Laura. You're a strong woman." James felt his face flush. Laura was playing the victim, implying that he had broken up the family. He called Catherine, sending her a screenshot. "Could this affect the trial?" he asked, trying to contain his anger. "Not directly," Catherine replied, "but it shows she's playing to the crowd. Judges don't like it when parties to divorces use social media to manipulate. I'll save that for the record. Ignore her posts and don't respond so as not to give her a reason." James nodded, but his anger was still simmering. He wrote in his journal, "Laura lies to everyone, even on social media. She wants me to look like a monster, but I won't let her win." It helped calm him down a bit, but he knew he had to be on guard. That evening, he picked up Liam from football and decided to spend time with both children. They had a board game night at Robert's, playing Monopoly. Emma was still quiet, but Liam was laughing, buying every street in sight. James watched them and felt that moments like these were worth fighting for. He decided to increase his time with the children. More walks, more conversations. Laura might be lying, but he wouldn't let her take away his connection with Emma and Liam. At his next session with Dr. Clark, he talked about the trip to the mountains and Laura's fast. "You've made a big step by finding peace in the mountains," she said. "It shows you can take care of yourself, even in a storm." "How do you deal with her manipulation on social media?" "I try to ignore it," he replied. "But it's annoying. She's rewriting our lives, and I can't respond." "You're already answering," Dr. Clark countered. "By your actions, spending time with your children, working with your lawyer, taking care of yourself. That's your truth, and the court will see it." James nodded, feeling empowered by her words. He decided to focus on preparing for the trial. He gathered additional evidence, letters from Emma's teachers attesting to his participation in school activities, and a note from Liam's coach. Robert and Matt wrote affidavits describing how James always put family first. By the end of the week, Catherine reported that the court had requested psychological evaluations of the children before the custody hearing. This was standard procedure, but James felt anxious. What if Emma or Liam said something that Laura could use? He decided to talk to them, to prepare, but without pressure. As he lay in bed, he thought about how the shadows of his past still clung to him. But the trip to the mountains had shown him that he could find light in the darkness. He was ready for the trial, ready to defend his children and his future, whatever it might be. It rained. James woke up with a knot in his stomach. Today was his custody hearing, and weeks of preparation, evidence gathering, and sleepless nights had led to this moment. Laura's Facebook post, in which she had implied his cruelty, still burned, but Catherine had urged him not to react. "Focus on the trial," she had said. "That's where we'll show the truth." He made coffee at Robert's house, ate toast, and checked his email. Catherine had sent a reminder: "Be in court by 9 o'clock. Dress businesslike, but not too formal. Keep your voice calm and state the facts." James put on a navy blazer, white shirt, and slacks, feeling like he was walking into a life or death exam. Tuesday morning in Nashville was cool, with a slight fog hanging over the city. James drove to the county courthouse, replaying in his head the speech he and Catherine had prepared. He wanted joint custody, so Emma and Liam could spend equal time with him and Laura. But Laura's demand for primary custody and her claim of emotional neglect hung over him like a cloud. He knew he should remain calm, but the anger at her lies still smoldered inside. The courtroom was quiet, smelling of old wood and cleaning products. James sat next to Catherine, who was leafing through a file. Across the aisle, Laura sat with Greg Thompson, her lawyer. Laura looked composed in a formal gray dress, but she avoided his gaze. James noticed her fingers fiddling nervously with the rim of her bag, and it gave him an odd sense of satisfaction she was nervous, too. The judge, a woman in her 60s with gray hair and a stern face, walked into the courtroom. Her name was Elizabeth Carter, and Catherine described her as fair but demanding of the facts. After the formalities, the judge announced that the hearing was about temporary custody until the divorce was finalized. James felt his pulse quicken. Catherine went first, laying out James's position. She presented evidence of his active role as a father, Liam's football training schedules, letters from Emma's teachers, and Robert and Matt's testimonies. She then brought up Laura's infidelity, showing screenshots of Dan's text messages, photos from the bar, and hotel and restaurant statements. "My client seeks joint custody to provide stability for the children," Catherine said, her voice firm but calm. "He has proven his commitment to his family, while Miss Keller has violated the trust of the marriage, as our evidence supports." Judge Carter nodded, making notes. James felt a little relieved Catherine was in her element. But then Thompson spoke. His voice was smooth, almost theatrical. "Your Honor, my client does not dispute the difficulties in the marriage, but they were caused by Mr. Keller's emotional detachment," he began. Miss Keller was the primary caregiver of the children, while Mr. Keller focused on his career. She asks for primary custody to provide stability for the children, and child support, given her lower income. Laura spoke next, her voice shaking but her manner confident. "I've always put the kids first," she said, looking at the judge. "James was often busy with work, and I took care of everything: school, training, doctors. I want Emma and Liam to live in our home where they feel safe." James clenched his fists under the table. Laura was rewriting reality, diminishing his role. He remembered staying up all night checking Emma's homework, getting up at 6 in the morning to drive Liam to practice. Catherine squeezed his hand, whispering, "We will answer." When it was his turn to speak, James stood up, feeling all eyes on him. He took a deep breath and began as they had rehearsed. "Your Honor, I'm not a perfect father, but I've always put Emma and Liam first," he said, trying to speak slowly. "I take Liam to soccer games, I help Emma with projects, I plan family outings. My job is important, but it's never stopped me from being with my kids. I'm asking for joint custody because they deserve both parents. As for Laura," he paused, fighting the urge to lash out. "She violated our trust, and I can't ignore that for the sake of the kids." His voice wavered in the last sentence, but he finished firmly. Judge Carter looked at him carefully, then looked at Laura. "Mrs. Keller, you say your husband was distant," she said. "Can you provide specific examples?" Laura hesitated, then began talking about how James often worked late and wasn't involved in family decisions. But her examples were vague, and Catherine quickly intervened, presenting evidence to the contrary: text messages in which James discussed school matters and photographs of family vacations. Thompson tried to regain the upper hand by citing Laura as the children's emotional support system, but the judge interrupted, asking for the court to focus on the facts. James felt the tension in the courtroom rise. Catherine filed a motion for an injunction, citing Liam's comments about Dan's visits. Thompson objected, arguing that it was an isolated incident, but the judge said she would consider it. After 2 hours of debate, the judge called a recess. James walked out into the hallway, adrenaline still pumping through his veins. Catherine patted him on the shoulder. "You did well," she said. "The judge sees that you are sincere. She is interested in facts, and we have more of them." Laura walked out into the hallway with Thompson, and James noticed the way she looked at him. Her gaze was a mixture of anger and weariness. She approached while Thompson was on the phone. "James, we don't have to do this," she said quietly. "We can work things out without all this, for the sake of the children." "It's up to the court now, Laura," he replied coldly. "You chose this path yourself." She turned away, and James felt a moment of regret, but quickly pushed it aside. She had lied for months, and now she was trying to manipulate him. He would not give in. After the break, Judge Carter returned with her decision. "Based on the evidence presented, I am awarding temporary joint custody," she said. "Both parents have demonstrated a commitment to the children, but I am requesting a psychological assessment of Emma and Liam to determine their needs. The motion for a restraining order remains in effect until the next hearing. The next date is in 6 weeks. James exhaled, feeling some of the weight lift from his shoulders. Joint custody was what he wanted, if only temporarily. But the demand for a psychological evaluation was terrifying. What if the children said something Laura could use? Catherine, noticing his anxiety, whispered, "This is standard procedure. We will prepare you and the children. The main thing is that we hold a strong position." Laura and Thompson left the room without a word. James saw her wiping her eyes, but he felt no pity. She had brought them to this. That evening, he told Robert about the hearing. His brother opened a beer and raised the bottle. "To the first round, brother. You gave her hell. Joint custody is a win. It's temporary for now," James clarified, but he smiled. "Thank you for being here." Robert waved his hand as if it was a given. James felt grateful for his support, but his kids were on his mind. He texted Emma and Liam, asking if they could go to the movies that weekend. Emma replied, "Okay, Dad," and Liam sent a popcorn emoji. It gave him hope that he was still in touch with them. In a session with Dr. Clark, he talked about the trial and his fears about the psychological evaluation. "I'm afraid Laura will turn the children against me," he admitted. "Emma already senses that Mum is lying, but Liam is too young to understand." "You can't control what Laura says," Dr. Clark said, "but you can be honest with the kids within their understanding. Tell them that the court helps you both take care of them, and continue to strengthen the bond, walks, games, conversations." James nodded, writing in his journal, "The trial has given me hope, but I still fear for the children. Laura is playing dirty, but I won't give in. I want to be the father Emma and Liam deserve." It helped calm him down a bit, but he knew the battle for the property was still ahead. Catherine called that evening to say she'd found a legal loophole. Part of his 401k had been saved before the marriage, which would protect those funds from being divided. It was good news, but James knew Laura wouldn't go down without a fight. He went to bed feeling both stronger and more exhausted than ever. The courtroom had shown he could fight, but the war was far from over. James sat in Catherine Wilson's office, staring at a stack of paperwork she had laid out on her desk. The news that part of his 401k, about $50,000, had been saved before the marriage had given him a glimmer of hope. It meant that the money could be excluded from the estate plan, strengthening his bargaining position with Laura. But the joy was short-lived. Catherine warned that Laura and her attorney, Greg Thompson, would likely challenge it, and the fight over the house and other assets would be intense. Wednesday morning was clear, but James could feel the storm building inside him. "We filed a motion to protect the prenuptial savings in your 401k, Catherine said, adjusting her glasses. "But Thompson has already responded, demanding a full appraisal of all your assets, including the company stock. Laura is also insisting on compensation if the house is sold. They're playing to wear you down." "Compensation?" James asked, squeezing the arm of the chair. "She cheated, lied, and now she wants money too." "It's a standard tactic," Catherine said, her voice calm but firm. "They want you to agree to their terms to avoid a trial. But we have a strong position. Evidence of adultery, temporary joint custody, no person orders. We can push back." James nodded, but inside he was seething. He couldn't believe that Laura, who had ruined their marriage, was now trying to take half of what he'd earned. Catherine advised him to continue collecting evidence of her financial irresponsibility, like her recent lavish dinners, and to prepare for the next mediation, scheduled in a week. After leaving the office, James went to see Mark Davis, his financial advisor, to discuss a budget for selling the house. Mark confirmed that selling the house for $450,000 with a $300,000 mortgage would yield about $150,000 in proceeds to be divided. But Laura could ask for more if the court found her to be the children's primary caregiver. "If she gets alimony, it's going to hit your budget," Mark said, showing the spreadsheets. "I recommend renting an apartment closer to the kids' school to minimize transportation costs, and keep a stash for unexpected legal expenses." James agreed and started looking for a place to live. He found a 2-bedroom apartment in Green Hills, 10 minutes from Emma and Liam's school, for what he made $800 a month. It was beyond his means, but being close to his kids made it worth it. He signed the lease that night and began planning the move. He wanted Emma and Liam to have their own rooms where they could feel at home. He bought simple furniture, beds, desks, a few Marvel posters for Liam, and shelves for Emma's books. It was a small step, but it gave him a sense of control. He took the kids to show them their new flat at the weekend. Liam was as energetic as ever, running around the empty rooms asking if he could hang a football flag. Emma was quieter, but smiled slightly when she saw her room overlooking the park. "Dad, that's cool," she said, fiddling with her sleeve. "But are we going to live in 2 places forever?" James swallowed, choosing his words. "For now, sunshine. But I'll do everything to make you comfortable. We'll have movies, board games, everything like before." Emma nodded, but her eyes were sad. Liam, on the other hand, was already planning where he would put his toy car collection. James could feel their reaction torn him between hope and guilt. He vowed to himself that he would make their life in the new flat as warm as it had been in the old house. On Monday, he got a text from Laura. "James, let's meet without the lawyers. We need to talk about the kids and the house." He read it 3 times, feeling the old doubts creep back. Part of him wanted to believe she was being sincere, but Matt and Travis's words about manipulation echoed in his head. He forwarded the message to Catherine, who responded, "Don't meet without me. This could be a pre-mediation push." James decided to ignore Laura, but her message still unsettled him. He went to the gym to release the tension. An hour on the treadmill and punching bag helped, but thoughts of Laura and the kids kept coming back. He wrote in his journal, "Laura wants to talk, but I don't believe her. The kids are starting to get used to the apartment, but I can see how hard it is for them. I have to be strong for them." In a session with Dr. Clark, he talked about the new apartment and Laura's message. "You're making big moves, James," she said. "Moving isn't just a change of address, it's a symbol of a new beginning. How are you coping with the pressure from Laura?" "I try not to react," he replied. "But her messages, they're like needles. I'm afraid she'll turn the kids against me." "You're already strengthening your bond with your kids," Dr. Clark countered. "The time with them, the new apartment, it shows you're a solid father. Laura may be manipulative, but the kids see that you care. What makes you feel stronger?" "Kids," he said after a pause, "and I signed up for a public speaking course. I want to learn how to express myself better, especially in court." "That's a great step," she nodded. "You're taking control of your story. Go ahead." The public speaking course he found online was a bit of an experiment. James had always been reserved, but the trial showed that speaking confidently could make a big difference. He felt awkward at the first class, but the trainer, a spirited woman named Linda, helped him relax. He began working on a short speech about his life, and it suddenly made him realize how much he had done for his family. By the next mediation, Laura had changed tactics. Through Thompson, she agreed to sell the house, but wanted $75,000 in compensation for her share and half of the 401k despite her pre-law savings. Catherine called the offer brazen, but encouraged James to consider it to avoid a drawn-out trial. "If we deny it, it will drag on," she said in her office. "But I'm confident we can contest the refund and protect a large portion of the 401k. It's up to you to decide." James considered this. Selling the house was inevitable, he couldn't pay the mortgage alone, but compensating Laura seemed unfair. He remembered her betrayal, her lies, Dan's visits to their home. No, he wouldn't give in that easily. "Let's go to court," he said. "I won't let her take more than she deserves." Catherine nodded, her eyes glittering with approval. "Okay, we'll prepare a counteroffer. Sell the house, split the proceeds equally, protect your 401k. If they refuse, the judge will decide." James felt his resolve harden. He was ready to fight, but he knew the price of freedom would be high, not just in money, but in emotional energy. He began spending more time with the kids to ease their worries. Board game nights, bike rides, even simple dinners in the new apartment became rituals. Liam still missed his old home, but one day he said, "Dad, this is a cool kitchen. Can we make pizza ourselves?" It was a small miracle, and James seized on it, throwing a pizza night where Liam splattered sauce all over the counter and Emma laughed and filmed it on her phone. Moments like these reminded him what he was fighting for. But Laura wasn't giving up. Mark Davis reported that she'd made another large purchase, $300 for consultations, which could have been a lawyer's fee or an attempt to siphon off the money. James forwarded this to Catherine, asking her to check. He also noticed that Laura had stopped posting on social media, which could mean she was plotting another move. Robert, as always, was his anchor. Over beer, he said, "You've already been through half of hell, brother. Laura wants to break you, but you're holding on. I'm proud of you." James smiled, feeling empowered by his brother's support. He began to think about the future, maybe a blog for men going through divorce, or even a book. But for now, his main goal was clear: to protect his children and his assets. By the end of the week, Catherine reported that the court had requested additional 401k documents to verify pre-trial savings. It was a good sign, but James knew Laura wouldn't back down. He went to bed feeling stronger than ever, but still on the edge. Freedom was within reach, but the price was rising every day. James sat in his new apartment, looking at the boxes still waiting to be unpacked. The lights of Nashville twinkled outside his window in Green Hills, and the quiet of the room felt strange after the noise of Robert's house. The move was a step forward, but Laura's text asking them to meet without lawyers sat on his phone like a time bomb. He reread it. "James, we need to talk about the kids and the future. Without lawyers, just us. Please." Part of him wanted to agree, hoping for a peaceful solution, but his gut told him this might be a trap. He forwarded the text to Catherine Wilson, who responded quickly, "If you want to meet, I need to be there. She might use this against you." James decided to wait, but the thought of talking to Laura was nagging at him. He started Thursday morning with coffee and a call to Dr. Clark, his therapist. He told her about Laura's proposal and his doubts. "I want this to end peacefully, for the children's sake," he admitted. "But I don't trust her. She's been lying for too long." "Your mistrust is justified," Dr. Clark said, her voice calm over Zoom. "But you can meet while maintaining boundaries. If you choose to talk, be clear. No promises, just facts. How do you feel when you think about her?" "Anger," James said after a pause, "and pity. She looks lost, but I can't save her." "That's an important realization," Dr. Clark nodded. "You're not responsible for her feelings. Focus on yourself and the kids. How will they adjust to your new apartment?" "Better than I expected," he smiled. "Liam's already planning where to hang his football posters, and Emma. She's still cautious, but she seems to like her room." Dr. Clark advised continuing to strengthen the bond with the children through rituals, dinners, walks, games. James wrote in his journal, "Laura wants to talk, but I'm not ready to trust. The children give me strength. I want them to feel at home in the apartment." This helped relieve some of the tension. That evening, he decided to agree to meet Laura, but on his own terms. He texted her, "Okay, let's talk. Centennial Park tomorrow, 3 p.m. Catherine will be with me." Laura responded an hour later, "Okay, I'll take Greg too, but I want it to be peaceful." James felt a mixture of relief and apprehension. Peaceful? He doubted Laura was capable of that, but he was willing to try for the sake of the children. The meeting took place on Friday in Centennial Park, under the shade of old oak trees. The air was cool, and James pulled on a light jacket, feeling his pulse quicken. Catherine sat on a bench nearby, her file in her lap. Laura arrived with Thompson, dressed immaculately. She looked tired, with dark circles under her eyes, but she held herself upright. "Thank you for coming," Laura began, her voice quiet but firm. "I want us to work this out for Emma and Liam." She paused, looking away. "I admit I made a mistake. My connection with Dan is over. It was stupid, and I'm sorry." James froze, not expecting this. Laura rarely apologized, and her words sounded sincere. But he saw Thompson frown slightly, as if this wasn't part of the plan. Catherine squeezed his hand under the table, reminding him to stay composed. "I appreciate that," James said, trying to keep his voice level. "But that doesn't change what you did. I can't go back. Let's focus on the kids and the divorce. What do you suggest?" Laura nodded, her eyes shining with tears. "I'll agree to joint custody," she said, "and to sell the house. But I'm asking for half the proceeds and 2 years of alimony. I want a fresh start, James, and I need financial support." Catherine intervened, her voice firm. "We agreed to sell the house and split the proceeds equally, but Mr. Keller's half of the 401k is questionable given the prenuptial savings. As for alimony, we are willing to discuss it, but only with evidence of Miss Keller's infidelity." Thompson started to object, but Laura raised her hand to stop him. "I don't want to fight anymore," she said. "Let's find a compromise. I, I just want the children to be happy. James looked at her, trying to figure out if she was being sincere. Part of him wanted to believe her, but years of lies weren't going to go away with one conversation. He nodded to Catherine, letting her negotiate. After half an hour of arguing, they agreed on a tentative plan. The house would be sold, the proceeds would be split evenly, alimony would be negotiated separately, and the 401k would remain in limbo until trial. Catherine insisted on putting everything in writing. This is not a final agreement, she warned James as they left. But it is a step toward peace. Watch her actions, she may change her tone. James nodded, feeling a strange mixture of relief and apprehension. This was the first conversation with Laura in months where she hadn't tried to manipulate him. But he knew he had to be prepared for any surprises. That evening, he picked up Emma and Liam from school and brought them back to the apartment. They had a taco dinner, and Liam, as usual, smeared sauce all over the table, laughing. Emma was quieter, but when James suggested they watch the new Marvel movie, she perked up. "Dad, your apartment is really cool," she said, sitting on the couch with a bowl of popcorn. "I like the window in my room." James smiled, feeling warmth spreading in his chest. These words were like a reward for all his efforts. He noticed that the children had become calmer despite the chaos of the divorce. Liam still asked about the old house, but Emma seemed to be settling into a new rhythm. At his next session with Dr. Clark, he talked about his meeting with Laura and the children's reactions. "You took a big step by agreeing to talk," Dr. Clark said. "How do you feel about her apology?" "I don't know," he admitted. "I want to believe she's sincere, but I can't trust her. I just want the kids to be okay." "You're already doing that," she replied. "Your apartment, your time with your kids, your determination that creates stability. What do you want for yourself in the future?" James considered this. For the first time in months, he allowed himself to dream of something more than just survival. "Maybe start a blog," he said, sharing experiences with other guys going through divorce, so they know they're not alone. "That's a powerful idea," Dr. Clark nodded. "It gives you a purpose. Try writing your first post just for yourself." James took the advice. That night, after the kids had gone to Laura's, he opened his laptop and wrote, "Divorce is like a storm that blows away everything you know. But in the midst of chaos, you can find a new path. I'm learning to be a father, a friend, and myself, even when everything is falling apart." It was raw, but he felt the words lift some of the weight. Early the following week, Catherine reported that the court was close to a final property decision. She had prepared a counteroffer: sell the house, split the proceeds equally, protect the 401k, and pay alimony for 1 year instead of 2. Laura and Thompson had not yet responded, but Catherine was optimistic. "If they agree, we'll avoid a long trial," she said. "But be prepared for them to drag it out." James nodded, feeling tired. He continued to spend time with the kids, strengthening their bond. They went on a bike ride on the Natchez Trace on the weekend, and Liam, as always, was trying to outrun everyone, laughing. Emma filmed him on her phone, and James felt their laughter healing him. He began to notice that the kids were adapting, despite the divorce. It gave him strength. Robert was there as always. "Over beer," he said. "You're almost there, brother. Laura may still have something to throw at you, but you're stronger than she thinks." James smiled, grateful. He began planning for the future: a blog, a public speaking course, maybe even a book. But his main goal remained the same: being a solid father to Emma and Liam. That evening, he received a letter from Matt, who offered to help with the blog site. "You're a programmer, but design isn't your thing," he wrote. "Let me get a friend involved. He'll do a great job." James agreed, feeling his friends' support giving him confidence. By the end of the week, Catherine called with news. Judge Carter had requested the final estate documents and set a date for the final ruling. It was the final push, and James knew he had to be prepared for any outcome. He went to bed feeling the new rhythm of his life. A mix of struggle, hope, and love for his children began to take shape. James stood in his apartment, looking out the window at the early morning Nashville. The sun reflected off the glass facades of the buildings, and the city seemed alive despite his own fatigue. The court ruling from the previous day still echoed in his head. After months of fighting, mediations, and emotional storms, the divorce was finally over. He poured himself a coffee, feeling a mixture of relief and a strange emptiness. Victory had been achieved, but at what cost? He opened his laptop to check his email and began to mentally replay the events of the previous day. Judge Elizabeth Carter delivered the ruling in Nashville Circuit Court with the same stern precision she had used in previous hearings. James sat next to Catherine Wilson, his lawyer, trying to keep his back straight even though his nerves were on edge. Laura and her lawyer, Greg Thompson, sat across from him, and James noticed her fiddling with the hem of her sleeve, a habit that betrayed her nervousness. The courtroom was nearly empty, with only a few clerks and a couple of spectators, but to James, it was the center of his world. After reviewing all of the evidence and documents, Judge Carter began, her voice booming across the courtroom. I make the following ruling. In the matter of custody, joint custody of Emma and Liam Keller is approved. Both parents have demonstrated a commitment to the welfare of the children, and a psychological evaluation has confirmed that joint custody is in their best interests. James exhaled, feeling some of the weight lift from his shoulders. Joint custody was his main goal. Emma and Liam would stay with him, and Laura couldn't take them away. He glanced at Catherine, who nodded slightly, her eyes glittering with satisfaction. On the property issue, the judge continued, the house on Green Hills is to be sold, with the proceeds divided equally after the mortgage is paid off. Mr. Keller's 401k is partially protected. $50,000 of his premarital savings are to remain his. The remainder is to be divided, but given the contributions of the parties, I award Mr. Keller 60% of the remaining funds, given the evidence of Miss Keller's adultery. James felt his heart pound. It was a victory, not a complete one, but a significant one. Laura had gotten less than she had asked for, and his savings were partially saved. He saw her head hang down, and Thompson whispered something to her, clearly displeased. For child support, the judge concluded, Miss Keller is to receive support in the amount of $800 per month for 2 years, taking into account her income and the circumstances of the case. All legal costs are to be divided equally. Case dismissed. The room fell silent. James turned to Catherine, who squeezed his hand. We did it, she whispered. This is a fair outcome. Laura and Thompson left the room quickly, without saying a word. James remained seated, feeling the adrenaline drain away, leaving fatigue in its place. He thanked Catherine, who gathered up the papers and patted him on the shoulder. You held up like a fighter, James. Now take care of the kids and yourself. If you need anything, call. He nodded, but the words barely got through. Justice had been done, but the victory did not feel like a triumph. It was the end of one chapter and the beginning of something new, and he did not yet know what that future would be. That evening, he told Robert about the decision over a beer in his brother's living room. Robert picked up the bottle, grinning. For you, brother, you kicked her ass, saved her money and the kids. I'm proud. Thank you, James smiled, but his voice was quieter than usual. It's just, I thought there would be more joy. I feel drained. It's okay, Robert said, his tone becoming more serious. You've been through hell. Give yourself time. The kids are with you, the money is there, that's the main thing. Now build a new life. James nodded, feeling his brother's words give him strength. He decided to focus on the kids and the future. The first step was to finish decorating the apartment. He hung posters in Liam's room, installed shelves for Emma's books, and bought a small sofa for the living room. They were small things, but they made the apartment feel like a home. He took Emma and Liam out for a celebration at the weekend. They went to 5 Points Pizza, where Liam, as usual, smeared sauce all over the table, laughing, while Emma filmed him on her phone. James watched them, feeling a warmth spreading in his chest. The court had given him the right to be with them, and that was more important than any amount of money. Dad, are we going to live in your apartment forever? Liam asked, munching on pizza. You'll take turns with me and Mom, James said, trying to keep his voice light. But my apartment is your home. Want to have a movie night? Emma nodded, her eyes softer than usual. Cool, Dad. Maybe the new Spider-Man. Agreed, he smiled. At home, they settled on the couch with popcorn, and James felt the kids relax. Emma even laughed at a joke Liam made, something she hadn't done in months. These moments reminded him why he was struggling, but he knew it would take time to adjust. Liam still missed his old home, and Emma sometimes withdrew, as if afraid that everything would fall apart again. On Monday, he began writing his first blog post, inspired by Dr. Clark's advice. He called it Weathering the Storm, Lessons from Divorce. He wrote about the pain of betrayal, the battle in court, how his children became his anchor. It was raw but honest. He sent a draft to Matt, who promised to help with the site. Bro, that's powerful, Matt replied. My friend is already working on the design. Let's launch it in a couple of weeks. James felt a surge of energy. The blog wasn't just a hobby, it was a way to give meaning to his pain, to help others. He began reading books on divorce and psychology to make the content useful. It gave him a purpose he hadn't felt since college. In a session with Dr. Clark, he talked about the trial, the children, and the blog. You found a way to turn pain into strength, she said. The blog is not only about helping others, but also about your own healing. How do you cope with the feeling of emptiness after the trial? It still is, he admitted, but the kids and this blog idea, they give me purpose. I want to be more than just a father to Emma and Liam, but an example of how you can get back up after a fall. You're already doing that, she nodded. Keep building rituals with the children. They'll help you all. James took the advice, initiating regular dinners, bike rides, and board game nights. Liam became fascinated with the new Lego set James had bought, and Emma began sharing her school stories with him. He noticed that she was less withdrawn, although she sometimes asked about Laura. Mom says she misses the old house, Emma said one evening at dinner, but she seems calmer now. James nodded, unsure how to respond. Laura seemed to be trying to adapt as well, but he wasn't ready to trust her. He simply said, the main thing is that you and Liam are okay. I'm always here if you want to talk. His friends from the basketball team continued to support him. Matt and Travis invited him to a game, and for the first time in months, James felt like he was part of a team, not just someone drowning in divorce. Travis even jokes, if your blog takes off, write about us. We are your army, brother. James laughed, feeling the friendship give him ground under his feet. He began planning his next post about finding support during tough times. It was his way of giving back to his friends and to Robert. Catherine sent over the final paperwork for the sale of the house. The appraiser had confirmed the price at $460,000, and after the mortgage was paid off, they would each receive about $80,000. It was less than James had hoped for, but enough to start a new chapter. He decided to put some of it into savings for the kids and keep the rest for emergencies. Laura, according to Mark Davis, had stopped making big purchases, which could mean she had accepted defeat. But James was not relaxing. He knew she could surprise. He continued to run in the mornings, write in his journal, and work on the blog, finding a new rhythm in it. Towards the end of the week, he received an unexpected message from Laura. James, can we meet? I want to talk about the past and the kids. No lawyers, just us. It was similar to her previous offer, but the tone seemed softer. James felt old wounds pricking, but he knew he had to be careful. He wrote in his journal, Laura wants to talk, but I'm not ready to forgive. My life is about the kids and moving forward now. He decided to reply later after talking to Catherine. Lying in bed, he stared at the ceiling, feeling the new rhythm of his life take hold. The trial had given him freedom, his children a purpose, and his blog a voice. He was ready to look forward, even if the past still cast shadows. James sat at a small desk in his apartment, staring at his laptop screen where a draft of his second blog post, Finding Yourself After Divorce, was open. He'd written a few paragraphs about how running and the support of his friends had kept him from drowning in the pain, but his mind kept returning to Laura's text from the day before. "James, can we meet? I want to talk about the past and the kids. No lawyers, just us." She sounded sincere, but after months of lies and manipulation, he couldn't trust. It was a clear Friday morning, and Nashville seemed calm outside, but inside James, a storm of doubt raged. He decided to discuss it with Catherine Wilson, his attorney, before responding. He texted Catherine, forwarding Laura's message, and received a quick reply. "If you wish to meet, I recommend a neutral location and a witness to avoid misunderstandings. She may be trying to influence you emotionally. Decide, but be careful." James considered this. Part of him wanted to close the chapter by hearing Laura out, but another part of him feared that this was another move in her game. He decided to agree to meet, but on his own terms, in a cafe with Catherine nearby and without promises. He wrote to Laura, "Okay, let's meet. Tomorrow, 2 o'clock, the Frothy Monkey. My lawyer will be nearby, but we'll talk one-on-one." Laura responded an hour later, "Thank you, James. I appreciate it. Just us." Her tone seemed gentle, but James felt he had to be prepared for any eventuality. That evening, he picked up Emma and Liam from school and brought them back to the flat. They had a dinner of homemade burgers, and Liam, as usual, rambled on about his football practice while Emma scrolled through her phone, occasionally chuckling at his stories. James watched them, feeling grounded by their presence. After dinner, they played Monopoly, and Emma, to her surprise, won, cleverly buying up all the red streets. Liam grumbled but laughed, and James found himself thinking that these moments were his new normal. Before bed, Emma lingered in the living room while Liam brushed his teeth. "Dad, are you okay?" she asked, her voice quieter than usual. "You seem kind of thoughtful." James smiled, touched by her attention. "Everything's fine, sunshine. I'm just thinking a lot about the future. How are you holding up?" She shrugged, but her eyes were serious. "Well, Mom seems calmer, but I still don't know how to feel about her. She really offended you, didn't she?" James swallowed, choosing his words. He didn't want to drag Emma into the details, but he couldn't lie either. "Yeah, she did things that hurt me," he said carefully. "But we both love you and Liam, and that's what matters. If you're having a hard time, talk to me, okay?" Emma nodded, hugged him, and went to her room. James felt her trust gave him strength, but her words about Laura reminded him that tomorrow's meeting would be a test. In the morning, he called Dr. Clark, his therapist, to prepare for his conversation with Laura. "I'm afraid she'll try to manipulate me again," he admitted, "but I want to close that door. Not forgive, just let go." "That's a mature decision," Dr. Clark said. "You can listen to her without committing to anything. Set boundaries, talk about the kids and the divorce, but not about the past if it's too painful. What do you want to get out of this meeting?" "Clarity," he said after a pause, "and so that the children don't suffer from our quarrels." "Then keep that in focus," she advised, "and keep writing in your journal. It helps you see progress." After the session, James wrote in his journal, "Meeting Laura is scary, but I'm ready. I want the children to live without our war. I'm stronger than I was, but I'm still afraid of her words." The entry helped him gather himself, and he felt ready to talk. On Saturday, he arrived at the Frothy Monkey 15 minutes before the meeting. The cafe was bustling, with the smell of freshly brewed coffee and the hum of conversation. Catherine had taken a table in the corner so she could be close but not intrusive. James chose a seat by the window, ordered a latte, and waited. Laura walked in at 2 o'clock, wearing a simple sweater and jeans, no makeup. She looked vulnerable, and for a moment it threw him off. "Thank you for coming," she said, sitting down across from him. Her voice was quiet, almost brittle. I wanted to talk about the past and how to move forward." James nodded, keeping his hands on his mug to hide the slight tremor. "Okay, let's talk about children and divorce. What do you want to say?" Laura took a deep breath, her eyes shining. "I know I ruined our marriage, she began. "My affair with Dan, it was an escape from myself. I felt lost, unappreciated, and instead of talking to you, I chose the worst path. I'm sorry, James. Not for the court's sake, but because you didn't deserve it." Her words hit him like a hammer. He expected manipulation, but her tone was sincere, and that was disconcerting. He remembered their youth, the laughter on the lake in Memphis, the nights they dreamed of the future. But then he remembered her lies, the bar on 2nd Avenue, Dan in their house. Anger flared, but he forced himself to speak calmly. "I hear you, Laura," he said, "but your apologies don't make the pain go away. You lied to me, to the kids. I can't forget that. Let's talk about making things better for Emma and Liam." She nodded, wiping away a tear. "You're right. I want us to be good parents, even apart. I agree to joint custody, to selling the house. I just want to thank you for the years you were with me. You were a good husband, even if I didn't see it." James felt something inside him tighten. Her words had touched an old wound, but he didn't want to give in. He knew that forgiveness wasn't for her, it was for himself, but he wasn't ready yet. "Thank you for that," he said. "Let's agree that we don't drag the children into our problems. They're worried enough as it is. If you have questions about guardianship or the house, write through the lawyers." Laura nodded, her face pale. "Okay, and good luck, James. I hope you find happiness." He looked at her, feeling the last thread connecting them breaking. "And you too, Laura," he said, standing up. "Take care of yourself." He left the cafe feeling a lightness he hadn't expected. The conversation hadn't brought absolution, but it had brought clarity. Laura was part of his past, and his future was his children, his blog, his new life. Catherine, meeting him at the exit, raised an eyebrow. "It went better than I expected," she said. "You held firm. Now the focus is on the kids and finalizing the sale of the house." James nodded, feeling a weight lift off his shoulders. He went back to the flat and wrote in his journal, "The conversation with Laura was the end. I didn't forgive, but I let go. My life now is Emma, Liam, and what I'm building." It was like a period in a long chapter. That evening, he received a text from Claire, a work colleague he'd started chatting with a few weeks earlier. They'd met at a work party, and her easygoing personality and sense of humor had drawn him in. She'd written, "Hey, want to grab coffee on Sunday? No pressure, just chat." James smiled. He wasn't ready for a serious relationship, but Claire seemed like someone he could take things slow with. He'd written back, "Sounds cool. Let's do 11, Bongo Java." He spent time with the kids over the weekend, going on a hike in Radnor Park. Liam ran around the trails collecting rocks, and Emma took pictures of trees for a school project. James felt their bond deepening despite the divorce. Emma even told him about her new friend at school, and Liam asked to sign him up for extra soccer practice. These little things were like beacons in his new life. Matt sent an update on the blog. The site was almost complete, with a simple design and sections for posts, a forum, and contacts. James wrote a third post about letting go of the past, inspired by a conversation with Laura. He felt the blog was becoming more than just a project, but a way to reimagine his story. Robert was there as always. Over beer, he said, "You're not the same guy who came to me with a bag," he chuckled. "You're building something of your own. That's cool, bro." James smiled, feeling grateful. He had received an invitation to speak at a local psychology conference discussing divorce recovery. It was daunting, but he decided to give it a try, using the skills he had learned from his public speaking course. By the end of the week, he learned that the house was officially on the market. The realtor said there were several interested buyers, and the deal could close within a month. It was the final step toward freedom, and James felt his new life becoming a reality. He went to bed thinking about Claire, the kids, and the blog, and for the first time in months, he slept without a heavy heart. James stood on the balcony of his Green Hills apartment, watching the sunset over Nashville. Orange and pink streaked across the sky, reflected in the glass facades of the skyscrapers. It had been a year since Judge Carter had handed down the divorce, and James's life, once in shambles, was beginning to take on new meaning. The coffee in his hand was warm, and Liam's laughter echoed in the apartment behind him as he played a video game with Emma. This moment, an ordinary evening with the kids, was what he had fought for. He took a deep breath, feeling a year of pain and anger and struggle dissolve into quiet confidence. A year ago, after the final judgment, James moved into his apartment for good. The Green Hills house sold for $465,000, and after paying off the mortgage, he received $82,000, as did Laura. His 401k was partially protected, and Laura's child support, $800 a month for 2 years, was manageable. Joint custody of Emma and Liam was his greatest victory. The kids spent half their time with him, and their new rhythm weeks with Dad, weeks with Mom felt normal. Emma, now 15, was starting high school and starting to talk about college, and Liam, 11, was getting even more excited about football. James became his team's coach, spending Saturdays on the field cheering on his son and his friends. The apartment, once empty and alien, had become a home. Liam's room was covered with football posters, and Emma decorated hers with shelves of books and photos from their camping trips. James added a cozy couch and TV to the living room, where they hosted movie nights. These rituals, pizza on Fridays, bike rides along the Natchez Trace, board games became an anchor for the three of them. Emma once said, "Dad, you have it better here than I thought." It was like a medal for everything he'd been through. His blog, Path Through the Storm, launched with the help of Matt and a designer friend, began to gain traction. James wrote about divorce, fatherhood, and recovery, sharing honest stories of his pain and triumphs. His posts on how to deal with anger, how to talk to your kids about divorce, and how to find new meaning resonated with men across the country. He received letters from readers' fathers, brothers, friends thanking him for giving them a voice. He began planning a book, sketching out the first chapters about his journey. The title was still a working title, Starting Over, Lessons from Divorce. A speech at a psychology conference in Nashville, where he had been invited 3 months earlier, was a turning point. James was nervous about standing in front of an audience of 50 people, but the skills he had learned from public speaking helped. He talked about his divorce, not going into detail, but emphasizing how the support of friends, therapy, and caring for his children had helped him get back on his feet. After the talk, several men approached him and shared their stories. One said, "You gave me hope that I could do it too." It was confirmation that the blog and its mission made sense. Claire, a co-worker, had become an unexpected light in his life. Their coffee at Bongo Java a year ago had turned into regular meetings, then discreet dates. Claire, a 37-year-old analyst with a warm smile and a sharp mind, understood his pace. She took her time, giving him space, and their relationship developed slowly but naturally. They went hiking, watched old movies, and laughed at her attempts to learn how to make tacos. James wasn't ready for anything serious, but Claire became a friend he could be himself with. Emma and Liam took her in stride. When they met, Liam even joked that she was cool, but she can't play Xbox. Claire laughed and promised to learn. Laura, too, seemed to have moved on. Emma said her mother had found a new job as a counselor at a private school and moved to a smaller apartment in Belle Meade. She didn't mention Dan again, and James didn't ask. Their communication was limited to short texts about the kids' schedules and schoolwork. After their last conversation at the coffee shop, where Laura apologized, she stopped playing to the crowd on social media, and James felt relieved. He hadn't forgiven her. The pain of the betrayal still surfaced occasionally, but he had let go of the anger. It was his victory over the past. Robert remained his main anchor. Over beers at their favorite bar, he said, "You did the impossible, brother. You went through hell and built something cool. This blog, the kids, Claire, you really are awesome." "I couldn't have done it without you," James replied, raising the bottle. "You were my corner in this fight." Robert laughed, clapping him on the shoulder. "I always will, brother." His basketball friends were supportive, too. Matt helped launch the blog site, and Travis became the first commenter, leaving humorous comments like, "Where's the post about me beating you at basketball?" James felt like he had a team around him that kept him from drowning. His children were his main focus. Emma, now a senior in high school, began talking about a future biology, college, maybe even a career in science. She was proud of her father, once saying, "Dad, your blog is awesome. You're helping people." Liam, a soccer fan, dreamed of being a striker, and James, coaching his team, saw his son grow not just on the field, but as a person. They still missed their old home, but living in two homes had become the norm. James made sure their time with him was full of warmth and laughter. In a session with Dr. Clark, which was now once a month, he shared his thoughts about the future. "A year ago, I thought my life was over," he said. "And now I have kids, a blog, Claire. It's weird, but I feel free." "You've done a great job," Dr. Clark replied. "You didn't just survive a divorce, you built a new life. What's next?" "I want to finish the book," he said, "and be a better father. Maybe even take the kids and Claire to the Great Smokies for the holidays." "That sounds like a plan," she smiled. "You found your way through the storm." That evening, James took Emma and Liam out for the weekend. They had pizza and watched Spider-Man, and Liam, as usual, spilled his juice while laughing. Emma rolled her eyes, but helped wipe the table, and James felt their connection deepen. After the kids went to bed, he opened his laptop and started a new blog post. The title was simple: "Starting Over, Lessons from Divorce." He wrote about pain, about children, about finding light in the darkness. The last line read, "Divorce is not the end. It is the beginning if you choose to move forward." He closed his laptop, looking at the sunset. A year ago, he was a broken man, lost his trust and his family. Now he was a father, a blogger, a man who had found himself. He smiled, feeling freedom become not just a word, but his reality. Emma and Liam were asleep in their rooms. Claire had written, suggesting to meet tomorrow, and the blog was waiting for more words. Life wasn't perfect, but it was his. He got up, turned off the light, and went to bed, feeling for the first time in years that everything would be okay. Subscribe to our channel so that your love doesn't cheat on you, and go ahead and listen to the next story, because this story is nothing compared to the next one. If you're under 18, don't even think, click to the next one.